people are consuming a lot of caffeine. They're under a lot of stress, and they're wondering, why am I having trouble sleeping at night?
So I said, one day I'm going to create something that's made to help people and not for profit. That's made to say, I want it to be natural and healthy and taste good and be actually effective. And the profit is a secondary thing. So that's why we started Shinergy. On the market right now, which energy drink do you believe that is the absolute worst?
Yeah, you are trying to get me in trouble, Brandon. So when it comes to energy drinks, I always look at
so the reason I started Shinergy was because I just wanted everything that I have done this far, meaning that the way I do my social media, the way I've done my e-commerce store, it has always been based on a necessity that I feel needs to be fulfilled. Meaning that when I started my merch store, I said, I'm sick of wearing product that's scratchy. You wash it one time and the sleeves are worn out. And it felt like people in the conservative movement that were making merch at the time was just giving you the cheapest stuff they can give you to make some income. And so when I thought about nutrition, and it all started when I was a cop, I thought about nutrition and I said, when I was working a night shift, I didn't want to drink those freaking dirty energy drinks because I thought, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, if I drank them like some of my other guys used to drink them, my partners used to drink 2 or 3 Red Bulls and Monsters a night, I said, I'm going to either be unhealthy or I'm going to have a heart attack. And all of that time, I didn't have the resources to create something. So I said, one day, I'm going to create something that's made to help people and not for profit. That's made to say, I want it to be natural and healthy and taste good and be actually effective. And the profit is a secondary thing. So that's why we started Shinergy. And I'm glad that we brought you on board because this has been a crazy iteration. You being, and we call you the Formulator. So tell us a little bit about like kind of your background, like what's your expertise and why is it important? Was it important for you to join us in developing Shinergy?
Well, Brandon, first of all, I didn't set out to be a scientist. I actually grew up in the media field, and one of the things I was doing was I was editing a lot of different material for the pharmaceutical companies, continuing education, and then nutritional companies, and I started really delving into the science and wanting to know more. I just had this thirst for knowledge, and then I started taking classes, learning more about it, and I developed a really unique education. And then I got into formulating about 25 years ago and started looking at how can I make things that actually impact people's health in a good way. There are so many things out there, so many ways to elicit a specific physiological response, but it's not necessarily a healthy way to do it. I wanted to do that in a healthy way. So I got into formulations. I got into how things work in the body, which isolates do which things. And I learned that there are lots of different ways to achieve the same goal, but not all of them are healthy. So for me, I wanted something that is going to make a good impact in people's health. I was looking at making America healthy again way before it was a thing. And so I started down that path. And when we were connected and you told me what you were looking to do and you showed me some of the potential formulas that people had come up with, some of these companies, you know, they're used to just knocking these things out. It's like a mill where they're just knocking formula after formula out. But you had specific things that you were looking for. And I said, this is a good match here. We can make something really good that really impacts people's health in a good way and gets them the desired effect that they're looking for. And that was the beginning of the Shinergy drink mixes.
So this is one thing that I felt was very important for me, and nothing against people who private label and who do the run-of-the-mill stuff where someone comes up with a formula, a very generic formula, and then they just private label it across the board. In your opinion, because I know how I feel about it, I felt that it was absolutely necessary to give people an authentic experience, which means that I know that the stuff works. I know because you having way more knowledge than me, is saying, if you put this together and this together, and I know that it's sourced and it's all put together in a way in which it's effective, because there's some people that do supplements and you don't know if where they're sourcing it from. Is it even authentic? I remember they had a thing where they went into GNC and they went and tested the products. I think they did this in Walmart as well, on the generic brands that's on the shelves, and they realized that most of it does not contain what it says on the label, or it's either highly deceptive, or it just absolutely had no value whatsoever. And it was creating an environment where people were being lied to, and therefore you don't know if you were getting a supplement that was reacting in your body through placebo, or it was actually being effective. So what do you think as a formulator is the benefit of having a direct formulation created from scratch versus someone who's private labeling?
Well, we always look at when we're putting products together, and I say, I usually work with a team at our manufacturing facility. The manufacturers that I work with are all what's known as GMP certified, good manufacturing practices certified. They go through a stringent regulatory process to get that certification. And so they actually get a COA, certificate of analysis, in on each individual ingredient. Then they test it to make sure it matches what is on that COA. And then when the finished product is done, they test it again. That's what I want. I want true authenticity. When I actually put my name on a product, I want to know that it works. That's my reputation. This is my future that's involved here. It's got to be right. And a lot of these other products out there, they're just a name of a product. You don't know who put that together. It could have been somebody in some other country just throwing stuff together because they think this works well, or this sounds like it works well. They know that this works like this works like this. However, certain ingredients can cancel each other out. The benefits get canceled out by something else. You may have two things that are good things, but they can't be taken together, because if they do, they cancel each other out. So we want to make sure that the formulations are put together in the right manner, step by step, to make sure it's going to give the end user the experience they're looking for.
Steve, what do you think is and I'm probably going to get you in trouble on this, maybe not. On the market right now, which energy drink do you believe, you can give me a top 3 if you want, that is the absolute worst when it comes to a person wanting to achieve good energy, clean energy, and not have potential residual side effects? So which are the top worst ones that you would say, I would never formulate a drink like that, and you wouldn't recommend people use it?
Yeah, you are trying to get me in trouble, Brandon. So when it comes to energy drinks, I always look at what is it sweetened with, first of all. A lot of them use artificial sweeteners. I see sucralose a lot in the ingredient lists. Duke University did a study back in 2008 on a sucralose, a name brand sucralose, and they showed that it's really bad, really harmful for the good bacteria in your gut. One of the reasons Americans are pretty unhealthy is the diet we eat and what it has done to our gut health. You know, the father of medicine it said back in the day, all disease begins in the gut. And we find out 2,500 years later, wow, he's right. All disease begins in the gut. And when we have bad gut health, we end up with leaky gut syndrome, things like that. So we need this good to bad bacteria ratio, about 80 to 20 or 85 to 15, good to bad. And what happens with that is we take that out of alignment. We end up with the joints in our intestinal walls separating. Bad things get in, viruses, pathogens, bacteria start getting into the bloodstream. Rotting food starts to get into the bloodstream. And then we end up with these joint aches. We end up with chronic fatigue. We end up with soreness. We end up with lethargy. We just are tired all the time. As a matter of fact, the number one complaint in doctors' offices is a lack of energy and being tired. And so people are turning to these energy drinks, but they're damaging their good gut bacteria, and they're overloading with caffeine. That's the other thing I look for. So when you say top, it's like the majority of them have these high amounts of caffeine, taurine, and these artificial sweeteners that are bad for our gut. And if you indulge me, let me go a little bit more on caffeine. You see 200 milligrams of caffeine, things like that. Most of these caffeines that are added are synthetic caffeines, where they've taken theobromine and they've added a chloroacetic acid to make that into a synthetic caffeine that gets into our bloodstream faster, but causes a fast reaction going up, a perceived feeling of energy, but then it also causes a crash. So you were talking about officers that you worked with back in the day that would be repeatedly on these drinks. Well, that's because you started a baseline, you go up, and then when you go down, you actually go below that baseline. That crash is so hard. And then what do? You take more. And it begins this vicious cycle over and over again. When you asked me to formulate the Shinergy day drink, you said, I want something that'll give me energy without a lot of caffeine. And I said, well, we need to use some caffeine because that's not a bad thing. We use natural caffeine sourced from green tea or green coffee bean. That actually is absorbed into the body differently. It's a slower absorption rate. It actually tapers off. It's no hard crash. And then we have added compounds. There are natural compounds with caffeine in a natural form that keep the body from getting too jittery. So people say, oh, I can't take caffeine. I'm not good with caffeine. Most of the time, they're not good with synthetic caffeine. And they take a natural caffeine and they're able to deal with that really well.
So would you suggest or would you refer and say that people, the first responders, that Shinergy would be a good source for them if they wanted energy? Because of the things that you just said, and I'll just give you an example, because I had to stop doing energy drink because I didn't want to have a heart attack. That's why I thought I would have a heart attack. 200 milligrams of caffeine, and you're just dumping 2 or 3 of them in your body in one shift. I mean, plus the adrenaline that you get. I mean, that day in and day out is going to wear on your body tremendously. So, but what happened with me was that you'd take them and you'll crash. And the most dangerous thing you can do as a police officer, especially working a night shift, is have the false sense that you have sustained energy. And then you crash. But then it's the night shift. So you're tired for being up all night. You take this drink and then you crash probably below where you started. And it's incredibly dangerous. So would you suggest that with how you formulated Shinergy, would it be a good energy source for people who are first responders?
Absolutely. And it's not just the energy factor of the caffeine that we mentioned. There are things in there that help with neurotransmitter production. I used a natural B vitamin complex too to help get that energy going in the body, but it also allows the body to release it quickly without a crash, without any addictiveness of other drinks out there. And again, it's trying to keep that high of energy that people are doing. And this is not going to do that. You're going to feel a more focused energy, a more concentration type of energy, clearing up brain fog. A lot of times people, they mistake the fact that they're low in energy for their lack of cognitive function. And again, the main reason for that is something called choline. There's a huge deficiency in the American diet of choline. A study not that long ago showed that more than half the people are deficient in choline. So there's choline in this product to help with that. There are things in there that are neurotransmitter precursors. Our brain cells communicate a lot differently than our other cells in the body. So the brain cells actually will make these neurotransmitters. A synaptic response happens, a little spark, and it triggers the shooting of this neurotransmitter to communicate with the neurons in the brain. When we are low on making neurotransmitters or we're not making them properly, that's when we start to feel this cloudiness, this brain fog, and it's perceived that, oh no, I've got low energy, when the reality is you're just a little bit malnourished in some of these particular things.
And with that being said, sleep. is an incredible component to having energy and, getting rid of the brain fog and a lot of other health benefits, right? Because sleeping helps you lose weight a little, because if you don't have cortisol running through your body and stress and lack of sleep, I mean, you can gain weight and all the other things that a lot of people are dealing with. I would argue, and I haven't seen a study on this, but common sense and wisdom tells me, and also personal experience, that the biggest issue in America, one of the biggest issues in America with people's health and overweight and all the other things that they deal with is the fact that people are not really sleeping. And I've noticed that these energy drink companies don't provide another alternative or complete energy, like I say, for Shinergy, is that you get a poor amount of sleep, you wake up groggy and feeling crazy, probably too much caffeine during the day to start with. That's why your sleep, and we'll get into that in a minute, that's why your sleep was poor, and then you wake up and you just cram these energy drinks. But it's almost like a cycle of dependency. You have poor sleep, you indulge in energy drinks, which cause you to have poor sleep, and it's a cycle. So we spoke about the daytime energy and all of the health benefits, knowing that people are struggling with getting the proper amount of sleep. We've created a solution for that, and that's the Shinergy Night Drink. So can you explain to us, why the Shinergy Night Drink is a great solution to help people get adequate sleep?
Sure. Well, sleep is really important. I mean, we have these little mitochondria, energy centers in the cell. Each cell has this little organelle meaning little organ, that actually causes us to have energy, ATP, adenosine triphosphate. And so the brain actually has multiple mitochondria in, 4, 6, or more mitochondria in those cells. So when those little furnaces are producing energy, they're also producing like a soot or smog, which reactive oxygen species, et cetera. So we have this garbage up there in the brain as well. Well, it's not until we get into REM sleep that the canals in the brain shrink a little bit and the glymph fluid will come in and wash those toxins out. So if we're not getting proper sleep, we're not detoxifying, we're not unpolluting our brain with all of this energy pollution that we've got up there. So it's important that we get into a good REM sleep. A lot of people are not achieving that these days, Brandon. They're, like you said, drinking a lot of caffeine during the day or other stimulants, chocolate, all kinds of things. And I'm not saying that any of these things are bad. They're all good in moderation, but we get out of sync and pretty soon it's, like I said, a vicious cycle. And then you've got anxiety. When you try to quiet the mind, people start thinking about all of these different things they're worried about. Oh, no, did I do this? Did I do that? Oh, no, I've got to do this, got to do that. How am I going to pay these bills? Whatever those thoughts are, they creep in as well, and then they start to keep us awake. So the nighttime formula is formulated with a specific ashwagandha blend in there from the roots and the leaves. People talk about ashwagandha. They put a pinch of this, pinch of that. We only put the amounts in there that we know will be efficacious, that studies show elicit a specific physiological response. And ashwagandha does not work on the central nervous system, but it somehow tells the brain, just calm down. Everything's okay. When that happens, there are a couple other little ingredients in the Shinergy Night Drink that actually will slow that brain down a little bit more and allow you to get into that level of sleep. We added just a little bit of melatonin in there. Melatonin can be controversial. There's lots of different levels that people do. We just put enough in this particular product to get you over the hump, to get you into that, so that you get into a good, restful sleep. You wake up feeling refreshed and you're not groggy, and you've got what you wanted out of that product.
I love the way you explain that, because that's exactly how I feel, and that's what I want it to feel, right? And this is another benefit of having a person formulate from scratch, somebody who knows what they're doing and understand how these products work together. It's interesting because I often wonder, why don't everybody do this? And I'm glad everybody don't do it, because then it leaves space for people who are authentically creating products to have efficacy. Because the biggest issue that I think happens is that people have to understand a lot of what they're experiencing in many cases is due to marketing. If you see a brand or a product everywhere. You assume that it has validity. You assume that it has efficacy, and it must be approved to not kill you or cause residual negative effects, hypothetically speaking, right? So you believe that. And then when you see all your friends doing it, and then when it's heavily convenient, which means that if you go to any store, you can find this product, and they put sugar in it and other things that get you trapped, and people take that as a good thing. They take that as it must be working for me. And personally, and I'm not an expert on this whatsoever, but personally, I think that that's where the flaw happens. What people should do, and in this Maha era that we're getting ready to enter into, people should say, does the product work? Because when I go to the store, and if I look on the shelves, and I try to go to grocery stores that are organic and healthy, and they don't have a bunch of garbage, you can kind of filter through it by going to a better grocery store. But when I get in there and I look at the shelves, I don't just look at product placement, right? Because the best sellers are in the middle and they put it there. I look at the back of the product and say, well, is this product healthy? You know, kind of like behind us, we have Masa chips and Vandy chips. Potato chips, the taste and the marketing is not what you need to look for. You need to look for what's in the actual chips. And so what's your thoughts on that? You know, just a little bit about what I said, the fact of how important it is to look for the actual ingredient versus looking at or identifying that you could be getting tricked or confused with marketing.
Well, it's not just looking at the ingredient. There's so much misinformation on the internet. So a lot of people can look at different things, but there'll be people that say this particular sweetener is bad for you, and it's based on one study, and it might be a flawed study. And I can look at that study and tear it apart and say, you know, this is not right. But we do know things like Vandy chips, Masa chips. I mean, we're talking about 3 ingredient products. That's what we're looking to do. That's what Maha is about, is bring it down to simplicity. I mean, organic potatoes, sea salt, and 100% grass-fed beef tallow cooked in. I mean, that's much healthier than all of these seed oils and things that are out there. And yes, there is a section of people out there that are looking for those seed oils. They're looking to read those labels, but they don't always know what they're looking at, or they're getting bad information from somewhere else. And so seed oils are bad. We should be avoiding them. But again, what do you replace them with? Well, I heard that this is good. Well, is it really good? Is that good for you as an individual? We all have different metabolic types too. So we have to really look at what is good for us, what works for us, and understand, you know, non-GMO or organic, those are labels. That doesn't always mean good. Just because something's non-GMO or something's organic doesn't mean it's good for you.
Let's talk about this for a minute. I want to get into this because this is another thing that I found out more recently, probably in the last couple of years, that shocked me. Just because it says non-GMO doesn't mean that every product that say non-GMO is created equal. Just because it says organic, I found out that some organic products are like not good at all. And they can use that organic label because they do 1 or 2 little things, or they put money behind, because these labels, they cost money. When you get it formulated, you got to pay for the organic certification. You got to pay for these. And when you have money involved, people can do things with labeling and find loopholes to create a situation where every product that says this is not created equal. And so I want to talk a little bit about this, because what is the dynamic of the range of acceptable non-GMO type things? What is the acceptable range of organic certified things, natural ingredients? You know how some people say natural ingredients. What does that actually mean? Because I thought that it always had to mean it's all natural, but I don't think that is the case.
Well, arsenic is natural, Brandon, right? I mean, there are a lot of natural compounds that you don't want to put into your body, and so when you look at these types of things, for example, even the B vitamin that we used in the day drink, that is a methylcobalamin versus a cyanocobalamin. Now, cyanocobalamin isn't necessarily bad for you, but it does have a cyanide component to it. So, you know, you could say, well, it's okay to take. You'd have to really take a lot If I had used cyanocobalamin instead of methylcobalamin in that, you'd have to drink probably 7,500 or 75,000. I'd have to do the math, stick packs in a day for it to be toxic for you. But still, why put it in you at all if you don't have to?
Right.
So that's why I choose to use methylcobalamin in my formulations. So you look at the same thing with any of these ingredients. Just because you didn't genetically modify something does not mean it's healthy for you. There still could be bad components in there. And then non-GMO doesn't mean that certain pesticides weren't used topically on these products. It just means that the product itself is non-GMO. So even natural pesticides, organic pesticides, can also not be good for you. So when you're looking at a label, yes, there are certain things that you really want to make sure. Dairy products, for me, I want to go organic on things like that. That's more important to me if I'm going to spend some of my grocery budget on something and make sure it's organic. Root vegetables, things that are bioaccumulators. I happen to know what things are bioaccumulators. Not everybody knows that off the top of their head when they go into the store, but bioaccumulators, that means anything in the dirt around it gets soaked up in there. And you think, well, isn't that all plants? No, plants take different minerals, different nutrients from the earth, but there are certain bioaccumulators that take in everything, and it'll take in bad stuff too. For example, there are a lot of places where DDT and pesticides that are considered unsafe were used. Well, what did they plant to get that out? Carrots, radishes, bioaccumulating root vegetables. They didn't feed those to people. They planted them, got some of that leached out from the ground, and went ahead and destroyed those things. But I'm just saying there are plants that do that we want to make sure. I prefer to use organic. But again, I don't eat totally clean. I go out to restaurants, I do things, but I make those other changes where I can, where it's easy. Like my energy drink, Shinergy Day. That's going to be good. When I want to relax at night, I don't want to take a pill form of anything, not any kind of melatonin or anything like that. I'd rather have a great tasting drink that gets the product into my body faster. I don't have to worry about the juices in my stomach wearing that capsule down and getting that in there at a certain time. I want to go to sleep at a certain time, 90 minutes beforehand, Synergy night drink, and boom, you're going to get a really good night's sleep. That to me is very important as well. So making sure that you have enough knowledge on labels as to what to look for and not look for is important, but just make your choices. Pick your battles as you go.
I want to talk about a few controversial things when it comes to certain ingredients or choices of product. For instance, what's your thoughts on raw milk? Do you think raw milk is a good thing, a bad thing? Do you think it's overrated? What's your thoughts on that? Because that's a very, very controversial topic.
Well, again, it comes down to how much do you trust the source of the raw milk? If you're drinking raw goat milk or cow milk, what were those cows fed? Were they grass fed? What was that grass sprayed with? I mean, there's so many things that you have to break down to get to that. Raw milk can be healthy for you, but the reason that there have been restrictions is because there are ways that that's handled, and they're not proper necessarily by farmers. They're not regulated. Sometimes regulations are good, and you could have contaminants. And milk breeds that particular product, dairy, is very good for breeding bacteria, good and bad. So, you look at yogurts with the good bacteria that it can build, but leave it out, you can also get bad bacteria from that same exact product. So you've got to be careful when it comes to milks and things like that. Pasteurization does help kill those bad bacteria off, but it does kill off some of the good stuff as well. For me, I'm not a raw milk. I don't consume a lot of milk in general, quite frankly. Maybe a little half and half in my coffee, but I'm using an organic milk, organic half and half, when I put it in coffee. Or if I'm making a shake, I might do a protein shake. I may add 6 to 8 ounces of milk. I'm going to use an organic milk. I'm not a big raw milk person, but I do know that it has specific health benefits because the pasteurization does take out some of those good things as well. Again, you've got to know where it's coming from.
Right. We drink raw milk. We have a little bit of, I don't want to give the company any airtime because they don't pay me, but
there you go.
There's a almond milk, organic almond milk company that we use. I could just say it. I mean, it's malt. And so a lot of people use that because it's a little cleaner version of the almond milk, because a lot of almond milks are like garbage. And so we use that just for everyday little protein shakes and different things like that. However, my wife just strictly drinks raw milk. However, we get the raw milk from a farm right here in Arizona that we know are doing the right things. It's a family-owned farm, and they don't produce a lot of it. So that's why, we kind of got to scramble to get it. And we get it, and they give it to us. And if you don't know the farm and you're not associated with the group of people that know that this exists, you don't get it. And the reason that I like it that way is because you know that they are not overproducing and having to skip processes to try to get everybody that needs the milk and supports the demand. So we love doing it like that, but we do diversify, right? And if there's milk out there, I wouldn't just say, I'm not drinking raw milk. I mean, I'm not drinking it because it's not raw milk, because you made a really good point. Like there's levels to this, right? Raw milk can be detrimental to you if you don't have it come from a place that's trustworthy. Just like organic milk can be bad for you if where it's coming from is not appropriated, right? Or the process is not appropriate. So there's more things that I want to talk about. I've been wanting to talk to you about all these things and pick your brain because I feel like you're the most brilliant person on this topic that I ever met. So when it comes to ketones, because I have seen companies and I've heard people talk about ketones. Now, people may not know much about ketones, so I want you to explain ketones just very quickly to people, and then what is the difference between ketones and other sources of energy? So can you define ketones just for the audience to get a quick synopsis of it? And then how does that compare to other forms of energy?
Sure. Our bodies will produce ketones under various circumstances, but there are products out there now that have specific salts, if you will, that produce these ketones. They cause the body to produce more of these ketones. And the mitochondria, the furnace of the cell, will take that in and burn that for fuel. Our bodies were actually designed to burn fat for fuel, but because of modern lifestyle and processed foods and a lot of breakfast cereals and things like that, not all breakfast cereals are bad. And again, something you don't want to eat every day, but we've become sugar burners. And so by changing the narrative in the cell and putting ketones, giving the cells fat to burn, that is something good. Giving the cells ketones to burn, that can be something good. It produces less reactive oxygen species. I talked about that smog in the brain that can be produced when your mitochondria are burning all this stuff for fuel, whether it's sugar or whether it's other sources. Well, burning ketones is a much cleaner source of energy. There's even a cleaner one than that that's in an upcoming product that I've worked on for you. Preview of coming attractions.
We should talk about that. Let's get into that too. About the new product. It's a more advanced iteration of a product that already exists. And we couldn't keep that thing, the TForce, we couldn't keep that thing on the shelf. We could not. We had to, we knew that even with the first iteration that it would sell out. And so we had to stagger the sales so we can have enough to come back so people weren't out for 6 months. But I said, wait a minute. I want to be consistent across the board about how we get our supplements made. And I feel it was a bonehead decision by me because I didn't come to you first, right? I went with a company that was they had a great reputation. They had formulated a lot of other stuff, but it was a generic formulation, right? The energy drink we went straight to you baked from scratch. We did the TForce formula. It was good. It worked. But I said, why am I not going with Steve and creating something that's going to be incredible? And this is what, and I want the audience to know this in all transparency, this is what I want to do with everything I create, you know? It was more of I didn't think that you would go into depth with that. I thought it was just a consumable liquid drink that you were an expert on. But then after we spoke about it, and I'm like, why don't we make this thing the best that it can ever be made? So let's talk about TForce real quick, because obviously you formulated the TForce Advanced. Can you talk about why TForce Advanced is the best testosterone boosting supplement on the market?
Sure, and I don't want to be arrogant about it, but I believe if I put my efforts into it, that I've made it as good as I can make it. That's for sure. So TForce Advanced, the difference between TForce, which is a good formulation, it's a good formulation, but TForce Advanced, you wanted something better. You said, I want something that really makes an impact in people's workouts and people's testosterone. And as I explained to you at that time, causing the body to make more testosterone isn't always a good thing, because we only have certain amount of the raw ingredients that we use to make our hormones in the body. The reason people are seeing so many hormone imbalances, in my opinion, is stress levels, excess cortisol. We get a text we don't like. Somebody cuts us off in traffic, whatever it is, news stories. You know, any of these things can cause you to feel that stress and anxiety, even for a few moments. And it causes the cortisol, the fight or flight hormone production, to just kick up a couple notches. Well, what happens? We end up with excess amounts in our body. Well, our adipose, our fat tissues, don't just store excess calories for future energy. They will actually take toxins out of the bloodstream to minimize what the body's dealing with. And so excess cortisol will be stored as fat in the body, in our adipose tissues. So we want to make sure that we're not overproducing cortisol, A, but B, we don't want to use up all of the raw ingredients making testosterone either. So I added some components to this that actually are precursors to hormone production, so that you're actually supplying the body with more of what it needs to produce the testosterone, not just forcing it to produce more testosterone. So by doing that, we have a product that is actually going to be healthier overall. Then I added something in there that burns even cleaner than ketones in the mitochondria. And that particular ingredient starts to produce more adenosine triphosphate, ATP, up to 67% more with no reactive oxygen species. And we have tests to show that. So this product is going to help you perform stronger. It's going to help you to perform longer. It's going to be a really great product. And I'm very excited. We're 6-8 weeks away from releasing that product, maybe even sooner.
Yeah.
I'm leaning on the manufacturer, doing everything I can to get that out there, because I know that your fans want to actually get that, and you want to get it as an individual.
100%. This is why I do what I do, Steve. Like I look at it and I say, what would I want to take? How because I feel like I'm either closely associated with the average man, right? Meaning that every man want to look good, every man wants to work out. Most men are not going to be on some crazy strict diet, but they do want to eat healthier. They do want to be around for their families. And a lot of men are probably in a similar situation as me. But then it's also men who have been athletes their whole life, people who are first responders, people who are in the military. So I feel like that I'm kind of like a microcosm of a lot of what men are experiencing at some point in their life, or maybe where they want to be to a certain degree. And when I think of that, I say, how do I create supplements for those men like me? I want to be able to take a supplement that I know for a fact will work. Because a lot of times when you take things in pill form, it's always a question of, like, especially because if you don't know where it comes from, it's always a question of, is this really going to have real efficacy? But when you formulate it, you know for a fact with you source the ingredients, you know exactly what works with what, and it is 100% going to be as effective as is prescribed, meaning that we're not going to tell you it's going to do something it's not going to do. Now, everybody's effectiveness may vary based on people's different genetic makeup or whatever the case may be. However, it's not going to be a testosterone booster, and it don't boost testosterone whatsoever because it doesn't have the components to. It's it being all a lie is not something people are going to experience. But let me say this: I always wanted to have, and these are just two products that we're gonna. I feel like I want you and I to do as many as we can to get products on the market that are natural, that are healthy, and that actually work. And so my strive is to have products that I would take and that I believe will work and that will work for me. Because taking the TForce right now, and obviously we made it probably a lot better. I don't know what the increment is. I don't know if it's 10 times better or whatever, but we've made it a lot better. And I'm excited for it to work because the TForce worked for me, and I know this is going to be leaps and bounds, probably leaps and bounds better. I've read them on the internet, and I don't know how valid it is. You would know better than me, or probably most people that write stuff on the internet for sure, is that caffeine. Now, in our product, we put about 75 milligrams of caffeine in the product. The reason we did it, because I didn't want to over-caffeinate people. And then if you under-caffeinate people, they don't feel the feeling that they're naturally, or that they expect to feel from an energy drink. Then we have another type of supplement on our hand. But there is this idea out there, and correct me and educate us on this, that when you're taking or consuming caffeine at 200 milligrams, 400 milligrams a day for some people, that it's going to have a tremendous detriment to sleep. Is that a fact, or is that somebody making it up on the internet?
Of course. Caffeine is going to keep you awake at night, and it can have a longer life for some people in the body. They always talk about half-life of a product, or when you start to see that taper off in increments. Caffeine can stay a lot longer in some people with slower metabolisms. A lot of Americans have blood sugar issues, and they're tagged as type 2 diabetics when that is a metabolic disorder typically. And what's happening is their metabolism has just gotten so slow that their sugar levels are kept higher for a longer period of time than they should. It could be an insulin problem, which again could be a hormone imbalance problem. But at the same time, you've got to look at, if somebody's metabolism is slow, they're going to metabolize caffeine. They could metabolize synthetic caffeine quickly, but it's going to come out of the body a lot slower. So those caffeine levels stay high.
Even if they consume, because I think the myth is, or at least people may think, if I don't drink caffeine right before bed, I'll be fine. But would it affect you if you started your morning off just loading caffeine? Or most people that go to work and work in a facility, or they work at a desk job or something, a lot of times they have a lot of availability to caffeine, and they just drinking, they find themselves drinking a little Red Bull here and there all throughout the day, or a Monster, or one of these top drinks that you could find anywhere. But then they think, well, I'm going to stop drinking caffeine at 2 p.m. I should be fine. With what you said about the slow metabolism, and the average American many Americans that are obese. And so probably a majority of Americans are having a problem with metabolizing at a slower metabolic rate. Are they safe if they stop caffeine at a certain time, or is it still going to affect them all the way through the time that they're planning on going to sleep?
So there's always going to be a cutoff time. Everybody's going to be different. For some people, I know people that can't have caffeine after 9 a.m. if they want to go to sleep before 10.
Wow.
Because they believe it's still affecting them. And chances are they're right. A lot of people are in tune with their bodies. They can listen to their body, and their body will tell them, okay, this is not working out, so let's try something different. And they trial and error learn that is that 9 a.m. cutoff time for caffeine. But then there are people that say, I don't do caffeine after 4 if I want to get to sleep by 10 or midnight because I know it'll be out of my body. Says who? Where are you getting it? You're looking at a study? The upper threshold of caffeine for an adult in a day is 400 milligrams. the majority of people actually exceed that. And so during the manufacturing age, when America really started to boom with all this manufacturing, the companies learned if we make sure our employees have coffee, they're productive all day long. And so they started introducing caffeine to employees through coffee. They weren't specifically thinking of caffeine, but they understood coffee kept people going, and they started giving coffee to their workers or making it readily available, as you said, in the workplace. And you look at the amount of coffee shops, you can't go a mile from where we're sitting right now without having 3, 4, 5. I mean, literally a block and a half away, there's a major coffee chain that's got a shop. And then a mile up the street, they've got another location.
Sometimes they do them next door to each other.
It's insane.
I've seen them be across the street. I've seen one company, Starbucks, had a Starbucks on this corner, and it had another Starbucks like on 2 corners down. So you're right about that.
Yeah. So people are consuming a lot of caffeine. They're under a lot of stress, and they're wondering, why am I having trouble sleeping at night? What am I going to take to sleep better? And, there were always jokes years ago about people taking Valium and taking other things, taking actual pharmaceuticals. And pharmaceuticals, difference between pharmaceuticals and nutraceuticals is pharmaceuticals will alter human physiology. And I believe that there is a time and a place for drugs. I'm not one of these people that is against drugs. I think that we are being overprescribed medications because we need to look at what is the root cause and how do we correct it instead of I need to mask the symptoms and work that way. And so for a nutritional product, there are nutritionals that actually can work like drugs. There are herbs that can work like drugs. And so I'm very careful when I formulate with herbs. I don't like to do it very much because they can have that drug-like effect as to where I want to do a nutraceutical approach where it complements human physiology. It supports human physiology rather than alter it. So that's what we're looking at here. And when you are overdoing these sleep products, they can become addictive. You hear the term, if you don't use it, you lose it, right? So if you're not naturally producing serotonin, you're not naturally producing dopamine in the right amounts, you start to have problems. That's another thing with gut health. So in both the day and the night drink, we used an isomalto oligosaccharide, which is a friendly bacteria food. So it breaks down. It's very good for the bifidus bacteria in the gut, which our gut is our second brain, and a lot of serotonin is produced in the gut. So if our guts are imbalanced, which most people do have bad gut health, they might not be producing enough serotonin to sleep better at night. So that's in there to help complement as well. So again, it's a synergistic or a synergistic blend that you use to get people into that proper rest, that proper sleep, versus worrying about having to really harshly counteract the effects of caffeine and stress.
Yeah, I've seen products. I did an analysis, when we were developing a product, and I said, okay, we have 1 milligram of melatonin in the drink. And because I have a 14-year-old, and this is one thing I want to touch on too, because I have a 14-year-old, I say, how much can my son take this supplement? He's a young guy, he's working out, he's in the gym, he's doing a lot of things. I would love for him to have good, sustainable sleep, and I would love for him to have good energy. So I have to measure, is it appropriate for my 14-year-old to take these supplements? But while doing that research, which I should have just asked you, but while doing that research, I noticed that there is a threshold recommendation for melatonin. And it appears that at the higher end of melatonin, that most of the research that I've seen, and I didn't read any medical journals or anything like that, I'm just going off of things that I've seen on the internet and, academic pieces that are available to the public. And I noticed that they said 5 to 10 milligrams of melatonin, which is 5 to 10 times what we put in ours, is at the very high end. Now, look, I went on to the top 5 sleep supplements that are on the market as top 5. I think ours is number 1, but once we get it to the market, they'll realize it. But these are the top 5 sleep supplements. The first one had 10 milligrams of melatonin. The second one had 5, and I think the other 2 had in between 5 and 10. Not one supplement on the market that was considered to be a top sleep supplement had less than 5 milligrams of melatonin, which is everything I studied said that's on the high end. That's almost too much. And I want to talk to you about that. Like, how much is too much melatonin that will create addiction? Because a lot of people really don't want to be addicted to caffeine, and you don't want to be addicted to melatonin, meaning that your body stop producing melatonin, or you can't even sleep without taking a supplement. That's one thing that I never wanted to do with our supplements, is create dependency. I wanted to create a necessity, which means that if you want this, you can get this. Not that I can't do this without this. Maybe I'm saying that wrong, but you get what I'm saying?
No, I get what you're saying.
I don't want people to be addicted. I just want them to have a good quality supplement that they can choose to take and reap the benefits.
So the interesting thing about that, Brandon, is I want to direct people's body put them in the right direction, but not force them into that direction. And that's the thing, is gently pushing people in that direction is one thing. Forcing them, that's when you're going to start getting dependency. And I see that those products will probably get you into a deeper sleep quickly, but you're going to create a dependency, and you're going to go to that. If you don't use it, you lose it. Your body's going to get lazy and say, well, I have other hormones to make. I don't need to make melatonin. I'm working on actually producing human growth hormone or insulin or whatever else you're trying to do, or probably cortisol in most cases. And so when you're doing that, that's not right. It's not right to overdo that in the body. And yes, you'll get the response you're looking for with those amounts, but the consequences down the road may be something you really don't want, where you are dependent on that. And I don't think most people in today's society, people are getting more educated about nutrition. They're getting more educated about what they put in their body. People want to live, it's not just live longer, it's have that quality of life at 70, 80 years old. And younger people don't think about this. I watch, when I'm standing in the grocery store or the Target or Walmart or something, and I'm watching the energy drinks fly off the shelf. It's these younger people in their 20s even, and even younger than that, even early teens, people younger than your son, actually going and taking these products off the shelf. And I'm thinking, yikes, they're not thinking about when they're 70 or 80. You don't start thinking about that until you're in your 50s, right? Or till those aches and pains kick in. But the best thing we could do is start early and educate kids. You want to feel like you're in your 20s when you're in your 30s. You want to feel like you're in your 20s when you're in your 40s. You want that vibrance and health. But again, for some kids, that's going to be falling on deaf ears. But it's good that more kids are getting on TikTok, they're getting on Instagram, and they are posting about these things. Because even if it just gets 10% more of those teens to start living a healthier lifestyle, it's going to help. The current level of healthcare costs in the U.S. is unsustainable. We are on a bad path. We have to lower that. Those trillions of dollars have to come down. And that's the point of making America healthy again. And so I know you're committed to only making clean, good products. I'm committed to only making clean, good products for you. So we're going to continue down that path and try to make it as good as we can.
That's great. That's great. And I love it. We could probably wrap with that, but I got one more question for you.
No, keep going.
Because I want because one of the things that I really wanted out of this product is for it also to be universally able to be consumed. Correct me if I'm wrong. Like, I looked this up, and I felt by looking it up that I was confident that my son could take the day drink. And because when I researched the consumption of caffeine for a person 14 years, and he's big. He's 6'3", freaking 170 pounds. So he's not a regular 14-year-old by body mass. So, but I looked it up and it said 100 milligrams of caffeine is like the absolute max that a 14-year-old can consume, and we're well below that. And it's a natural supplement. Also, to sleep. I know melatonin is a thing, but magnesium is the key component, I think, one of the key components in our night drink. And magnesium is very healthy, and kids should be consuming magnesium to a certain degree. So, in your opinion, is the product safe or appropriate with parental authorization, right? You don't want kids trying to buy this stuff on their own. Your parents need to make it approval. But do you feel it's safe for younger people to take, meaning that right around the teen age or right around 17, 18 years old?
So when my son was in college, he was working at a major coffee chain, and he said to me, I can't believe the amount of kids coming in and they're not getting the talls, they're not getting the grande, they're getting the venti coffees, the 20 ounces that have 400-500 milligrams of caffeine, and drinking it. I mean, that's pretty common, actually.
Yeah, my son tells me that his peers are just knocking energy drinks back. Like they're knocking them down. That Prime energy drink, they got into a controversy and the government is looking into them. But my son, because I think that it was a confusion in marketing, because there's the hydration drink and then there's the energy drink. And my son grabbed the energy drink from a store before a baseball game. And on the label, it says, should not be consumed if under 18. It says it on the label. I don't know why the grocery store or the convenience store will sell that to a kid when the label says you cannot consume that under 18 or not recommended. But when I saw it, I said, you can't drink this. You're a kid. You're going to drink 100, 200 milligrams of caffeine before going to a baseball game, and you are 13 years old? Insane. So I want you to finish what you were saying about the kids over-consuming caffeine.
Well, and so the American Academy of Pediatrics does not want caffeine given to a child under 12 at all. And now there are different studies out there by different groups, and I'm not sure who's funding those studies. I'm not a big conspiracy guy, but it's I always have to look at them a little bit sideways. But they say, there's different levels at different ages, but once your son is, once a kid hits puberty, I think that they can start to tolerate some caffeine. It's not going to be necessarily a bad thing. And again, I'm going to want you to go natural a lot more than I will a synthetic caffeine that is typically found in the energy drinks, typically found in sodas, but 75 milligrams, perfectly safe for a child your age, your son, at age 14, 6'3", 170 pounds. That has something to do with it as well. So all of these things are factored in. And quite frankly, if he did 2 a day and they were separated far enough apart, he would probably be okay with that. But then I start to worry if he does that day after day after day, now it's going to start interfering with sleep. It has to.
Right. I love that. Also, the night. What's your take on the night? It has a tremendous amount of, or a good, I think, fair amount of magnesium in it, and it's only have 1 milligram of melatonin.
So I used a very specific magnesium in that product that will help you to get better sleep, but it won't clean you out. Like milk of magnesia is a magnesium product. You have a lot of magnesium, it's gonna clean you out. This won't clean you out. It does what you want it to do, where it relaxes, it soothes the body. It's got a soothing effect on the body to help you to sleep just that much better. Many of us are depleted in magnesium. And whenever we get our sodium, magnesium, our potassium out of whack, that could cause muscle issues, twitching, nerve issues. So you want to make sure that you're soothing the body, but I don't want to clean somebody out.
Yeah. In the middle of the night, you had to get up and poop every minute.
Yeah.
But no, I think it's great. And I'll finish it with this. My experience, just so people know, I've been taking this Shinergy way before it was on the market through testing and all this other stuff. But since it's been on the market, I've been taking it every single day that we've made it live, the day and the night. And the way it reacts to me is that I take this even now, and I feel like my brain is just lit up. I feel like my brain is lit up more than my body is, to be honest. Like, I feel awake and alert physically. My brain is just hyper focused and hyper vigilant, and I feel like I can talk. I was talking to my wife last night. Not my wife. I was at the cigar lounge with one of my friends, and it was late, man. My body was tired. Like, I wanted to go to sleep, but my brain was just on point. It's like it had been just on point all day long. And the beauty of it is that my body is tired enough where I could go to sleep. I drink a night drink, I'm good. Great sleep, I can get down. But my brain doesn't feel so foggy all the time. And it almost seems like it's a residual conscious alertness that I have all day long. And then I get good sleep because it's not overwhelming to the point where I'm thinking all night. It's just that if I had to think at any point, I'm sharp. And so I go to bed and I wake up, and then so the night drink, as soon as I drink it, it's like within 15 minutes or so, I can feel it. I'm feel my body relaxing. I'm like, man, this is crazy. Like, it's this stuff really works. Every time I do it, I'm like, this stuff really works. And then I feel probably about 30 minutes in, and this is with me probably doing stuff I shouldn't be doing before I go to bed, is just scroll on my phone. Even with scroll on my phone, I'm feeling it. And I go, and I was like, I almost feel like I feel the melatonin kick in. It could be in my mind. But I start to feel like, yeah, I'm about to go to sleep. And I go to sleep and I wake up and my mind is firing, right? As soon as I wake up, and I noticed the difference, Steve, because when I wasn't taking it consistently, when we were in the testing phase, which I only have so many samples to take, I would wake up and my body would be tired because I didn't get enough sleep, but also my mind would be tired. It's like, I can't think, I'm getting up and brush my teeth, let me do this. But Shinergy, without even taking a day, I wake up and I'm like, I'm ready to go to work in my mind. I'm sharp about everything I'm thinking about. I know what I want to do today. All of my thoughts are coming to me. Everything I want to talk about for the day is just on. And that's before I even take a day drink. More
Importantly, your wife loves it.
Yes.
So that's the thing. When we were running out of samples during the testing phase, those samples were all made by hand in the lab. So then, you were like, hey, when are we getting more of this in? So that was great. And the other thing with the day is you were the test subject, the main test subject. Sometimes you're on the air for 3 hours at a whack. Yeah. So you said, I need something that will get me through those shows without too much caffeine. And so we tried a couple different iterations before we even, because you wanted me to start with no caffeine.
Yes.
And then we realized that 75 milligram threshold was good. You didn't get the jitters. Yep. And boom, you were thinking clear all day long. You were able to do your show and there was no problem. So I'm happy for you. I'm happy for everybody out there that can get on these products because they're really going to do a job. And I'm not selling it. We're not trying to sell you. We're trying to well you.
Yeah.
That's what we want to do. I mean, we want to make sure that we are putting out good products that people feel a response to. We want to help make people healthy. We want to help make America healthy again. And that's one of the things that I think these products are designed to do. That's what I designed them to do. And I appreciate your input and telling me what you're looking for so I can continue to do that. And we're going to have a lot more products as we go.
Oh, yeah. I want everything. Y'all see, I want everything. Everything that's in the market that people are consuming, I want to competitively challenge that product. Meaning that if somebody got a product that's working fine and is perfect and is good, I'll take the product. But if we look into the market and there's products that you say, this is the leading colostrum product and this is what it has in it, or this is the leading hydration product, or this is one of the top hydration products, what are people doing? I want us to come up, and I know that we will, is the most effective way to have that type of product to the market. And I would suggest that people and I got to be a living example of this. When people are watching me and they go, Brandon, how in the world do you do this? How do you talk on a thing? How do you do all these videos? How are you doing all these interviews? How are you traveling all over the country and you still? And that's because I developed a supplement. We developed a supplement that will make that happen. And I think every entrepreneur, every first responder, because that's my heart, is the first responders. Every entrepreneur, every first responder, every person that needs to use their brain, which is probably every single person on planet Earth, especially going to school, going to college, universities, before a test. I can imagine before a test, you get a good night's sleep. I can imagine before a game, you get a good night's sleep. I can only imagine all of the different benefits, no matter what demographic you fall into, that this will give you what you need to change the game. All right, Steve, thank you so much for coming on. Steve, the Formulator. I really appreciate you, man. We got to do this again.
Thanks, Brandon. Appreciate you.
All right.